Okay, at 6 o'clock, I will call to order the Village Board of Sister Bay. Roll call, please.
Shampoo,
Here.
Bordeaux,
Here.
Cox,
Here.
Orozco. Here. White. Here. Bell,
Here.
and Warner is excused.
Okay, on to the agenda.
I had one question. We had a library committee meeting yesterday, and I was wondering if we could add, if appropriate, somewhere in here. We are down to representatives from Sister Bay on the library commission. I'm wondering if we could address that today.
So officially, we're only down one. So we
Fair,
need to get-
Marge
we
has-
need to
okay.
get that clarified, especially with what just happened a couple months ago.
That's fair.
But we could,
Officially one, and we know that one is coming.
suspect, yes. So what if we put that between 10 and 11?
That would be fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, that'll be an appointment for the library committee. Do I have a motion?
Second.
To approve as amended. Motion by Roscoe, second by Cox, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Approval of the meeting minutes from December 19th. Additions, subtractions, corrections, anyone? We have a motion by Cox,
Second.
second by Roscoe. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Chris?
Hi, Chris Schmelz, 329 Mill Road, Door Hotel. We're here tonight representing the Door Hotel Holdings LLC to a notice received via certified mail and signed for the first week of January. You're ordered to pay a fee for non-compliance of $13,575 per month. A letter was written to the Planning Commission on October 26th, asking for a process to present the facts from the sign permit in question. We believe the sign is not the real cause of concern, but the non-compliance with grant funds used to purchase the Sister Bay Marketplace parking lot. We had a meeting with the village president, village administrator, to discuss the matter on November 14th. The village office, we had asked to be placed in the agenda for tonight's meeting, but were denied the request. We have done nothing wrong. They're asking for the process to present the facts and come to a global resolution. We provided copies of the letters tonight and then emailed all the board members. To the village of Sister Bay, it's been brought to our attention that the village is out of compliance with the grant fund program through the Department of Natural Resources. We're asking for permission from the board to research suitable options to bring the grant into compliance. A Freedom of Information Act request found that grant funds used to purchase the property located in the Sister Bay Marketplace are to be allocated entirely for public use. However, the village of Sister Bay signed a development agreement providing exclusive use to portions of property for the Door Hotel. Consequences for non-compliance for the last 3 years could result in the village having to reimburse the full amount of $1.4 million state aid according to grant approval. The Door Hotel Holdings LLC was not allowed to include lots 10 and 11 in Sister Bay Marketplace in the purchase of the hotel project due to the incumbents of public funds. The full details and grants were not provided until a second Freedom of Information request was made. At the time of the initial offer for the Braun property by the Door Hotel, the village asked that the developer trust and work with the village in request and respects the parking lot. The Village of Sister Bay Board requests to add paperwork to the village file. We are writing a response to the request to remove the sign for the Door Hotel on Mill Road. It is not disputed that the sign location and basic language were approved, only that the drop-down sign was not on the approved sign paperwork in the village file. We reviewed the timeline of signatures, email submissions, and discussions with village officials. It was confirmed by village officials that an in-person meeting took place with the village administrator to review the changes to the original permit. After the original permit was submitted by email, details that paperwork are attached. So it was sent out. The Door Hotel would not place a sign without proper approval.
I'm listening
We're
to the
asking-
county board meeting, Sister Bay Board.
You're asking the committee to allow the final paperwork for the sign to be added to the village paperwork. The difference between the original submitted sign permit application and the installed sign are not material. The Mill Road sign matches the sign on Bay Shore Drive. The language is essentially the same, and the total sign square footage is under the amount allowed by the village. We feel the reason for the request relates to the grant funds used to purchase lot 11 and install parking for the Sister Bay Marketplace. We are asking the committee to refrain from any action until the parking lot questions can be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Right. Yes,
My name is Vicki. I'm very concerned about the way that our village board is prioritizing needs versus wants. Do we really need more property? We have not really figured out what is going on with the Wiltie property. I think that's taking on a lot more debt than we may need. And when we talk about needs versus wants, you know, like the fire station has mentioned that maybe they may need more space in 10 years. Well, that's not an immediate need. It may be a desire down the road. We just built this fire station not too long ago. It should be able to last, a few more years, at least 10. Why, another thing that concerning priorities, it's been stated through the Wiltie group, or not the group, but the committee that was working on the Wiltie property, that we need low income housing or housing for our workers, more housing for our workers. Why are we suing someone that is trying so hard to make that happen and provide that, and somebody in our community who has a business and is, as far as I know, an outstanding citizen? To me, that's sort of counterproductive. And I don't even know, can somebody answer me at some point why we need the Lyrequist property?
I mean, this isn't a dialogue, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but we can,
Sometime.
we can. Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't know how you do this. How do I raise my hand on Zoom?
Go
I
ahead,
think you
Mike.
raised your hand.
Thank you, Nate. I have two messages I would like to send to the Board of Trustees. First of all, I'm very
Could you state your name and your address for the record?
I apologize. Mike Laskowitz. I'm from Sister Bay. I can't remember my street number on North Bay Shore Drive, but I'm just north of Mickey, who just spoke.
Thank you.
Sorry. Two issues. One, I was very concerned with the whole village budgeting process this year. I realize that there's a lot of pressure on the village board and the staff to operate under a short timeline to get their analysis complete and make their recommendations. But what was really concerning to many of us in the village of Sister Bay is that when the revaluation took place this summer, there was a letter that came out to all of the citizens of the village that indicated that while valuations were up substantially, there was estimated mill rates, which when applied to your new valuation, led you to believe that we would not see a major increase in property taxes, and that was not the case. Further, when you look at village spending, I realize over the last 3 years, we've had very high rates of inflation, but the village spending is double, tripling, sometimes quadrupling the rate of inflation, which is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Well-managed communities in the state of Wisconsin, typically try to target the rate of inflation for the increase in property taxes. There are many states with legislation that caps the rate of increase annually on property taxes. We have to seize control because this trend line we're on is unsustainable. That's my first message. And I would just say, along with that, I think we have very talented people on our board of trustees, but I think they have to become much more astute as it relates to understanding the finances of the community. We can't just rely on the staff. The Board of Trustees has a fiscal responsibility to members of the community to understand what's going on with spending and operating costs and managing a budget that's fair and reasonable. If we don't, we have a lot of cost challenges. We're gonna create more housing problems because property taxes get added on to the mortgages people are paying with already very high interest rates. And we're gonna make this a community where people cannot afford to live. That's my first point. The second message is, as I've attended these meetings over the last year, I'm getting very frustrated with executive sessions that take place in the middle of the meeting. We work very hard to get people to attend the meetings. We get up here, and in the middle of the meeting, the board leaves for an executive session, which is allowed. However, many of us feel it can be in conflict with the state's open meeting laws, especially if it's the discussion that the community is involved with. And I see it's going to happen again today. We're going to have an executive session. It's not before the meeting. It's not at the end of the meeting. It's very difficult for a lot of people to hang in there, especially if they have kids or they have to get up early for work. These executive sessions maybe should be happening at a different point in time. And there is a certain amount of documentation that has to be done with those executive sessions, because as citizens of the community, we have the right to know what's being talked about. And in today's case, it's something the whole community is concerned about. Mickey just talked about it. We all know Paula. We're not a big community, and we're all very concerned about what's happening. So my message is we need transparency. That's what democracy is all about. And when we legislate and make decisions outside of an open platform, it's not fair to anyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, Paul, we have one here in the room, if you want to just hang out 1 second.
Okay. My name is Michelle Novak. I live at 10848 North Bay Shore Drive. My concern is that I am the person whose taxes went up $2,000 this year. I don't know how much yours went up, but as the last two previous people spoke, I find this very concerning. I think it's unfair and also unsustainable. I hope that you will look at the budget and the spending. There's just things that just seem unnecessary, like the person before mentioned about needs versus wants, and see how it affects the local taxpayer, the local resident. It's just very upsetting. I feel like I'm being taxed out of my home and my village. And I've only returned home, let's say 10 years ago, but I was born and raised in this village. And I feel really bad of what has happened to this village. Things that are upsetting to me are spending money on administrative building, money towards sports complexes, doing what you could to control STRs or even like building heights, something. I mean, there's got to be something in your control, or maybe things that are littler, fireworks. Do we need to have 3 or 4 fireworks? But pick one. It used to be just the 4th of July. That was pretty good. Christmas decorations. We could have half the decorations we have and it'd be plenty. Let's, don't maintain them. Let's reduce them. That would be like little things, or maybe no bike racks, something. I understand maintenance. Maintenance is one thing, but excessive spending is another. So especially to the local taxpayer, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Paula, are you there? You're muted.
Hi, sorry for that. I would like to read a letter that I submitted to the Sister Bay Village Board regarding the lot 2387 Ava Hope Court that I purchased from the village in February of 2022. I'm writing to voice my concerns regarding the executive session agenda item involving the fourplex project at 2387 Ava Hope Court. When I step back and observe the big picture, this has been an amazing project to be a part of. The fourplex is repurposed short-term rentals that have the potential to provide 8 bedrooms of year-round housing in Sister Bay while keeping the story of the Little Sister Resort alive. Of the 24 structures on the Little Sister property, 17 were relocated to be repurposed, including the Little Sister Barn, now set down on its new foundation in the village. Relocating the Little Sister Resort will have an impact on the community for generations to come. Though challenging and fraught with complications from the beginning, this housing development came from the desire to do good for the community. I thank the Sister Bay Village Board for seeing the value in this project. I was granted a variance January 18th, 2023 by the Sister Bay Zoning Board of Appeals. During the hearing, the village administrator suggested the board put a separate deadline of August 31st, 2024, by which the building had to be on a permanent foundation. With a development agreement still required, drafting of new foundation plans, and contractors being booked out months to a year, I was concerned the deadline was not realistic. But the Board of Appeals accepted the suggestion, and the variance was granted with the order in place. In February of last year, the Planning Commission approved the development agreement, followed by the board in March. Towards the end of March, I was discussing the grading for the basement with the village administrator, and she mentioned that I was not able to do a basement without going back through planning. I was never required to turn in a foundation plan during the planning process and was never asked about the depth of footprint for the fourplex. I was told by the office that once approved by the board, I needed to give my foundation plan to the building inspector and he would issue the permit. In my case, the administrator said it was assumed that the building was on a slab or crawl space and I would need to present new plans. I began the process of getting those plans, and the administrator did later correct that instruction, concluding that if an in-ground basement was installed, it could be approved in-house without going back to planning. I did continue with the plan for the walkout basement and was approved pending a new stormwater runoff plan by the Planning Commission. In July, due to delays and issues with the grading plans, I knew I would not meet the deadline and was told by the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Tom Sadler, to ask the village for an extension. I was told by the zoning administrator that an extension could not be given since an order, which was the deadline of August 31st, was placed on the project. And I could not reapply for the variance because technically the variance did not expire until January 18th of this year, 2024. The options were to complete the project or let a lawsuit unfold. The following is the zoning administrator's response when I asked for about the process for an extension. I was concerned you'd have problems, and that is why I kept writing. Tom is wrong in that we cannot give an extension. The only way to go beyond August 31st is through the court. Basically, you ignore us and we start a lawsuit. Once in compliance, we settle the lawsuit. I'm guessing we'd for sure have you pay our legal fees, and it's up to the attorney if a penalty is opposed or if we go for injunctive relief. I will clip this out, but the Zoning Board of Appeals shall have the following powers according to our village zoning code, section 66.1603, and errors to hear and decide appeals when it is alleged there is an error in any order, which was enforced on my property. Permits, the board may reverse, affirm wholly or partly, or modify the order. So I am unclear as to why there was no path forward besides going to court. On December 21st of 2023, I received my building permit. And I will shorten this somewhat because I did forward this to the board. But basically, the zoning administrator had the building inspector pull my permit and force a stop work order on Friday, December 12th. That ensures that my project will be stalled. Currently, there's a stop work order and no work is being allowed on the property. And I will now not meet the January 18th deadline because all work is currently stopped. even though all the excavation has been done and the walls are in. I understand that there was a deadline enforceable by a court order. I also know that many projects ask for extensions and they are often granted. The most difficult part of this project by far has been navigating the unclear and conflicting information given from appointed village staff. I'm confused as to why it was appropriate to impose a separate deadline when a variance is normally good for 1 year, especially in a climate where it's hard to even get on a contractor's schedule, let alone keep a project on schedule. I'm also unsure why the action that was enforceable since September 1st is now being enforced as the work is underway on a project approved and supported by the village when housing is so desperately needed in the community. I feel we are losing sight of the bigger picture. We can hold the process above all else, but in this case, my goals are aligned with the village. After a long struggle, those goals are finally within reach. Get the building on the foundation and avoid a costly, unnecessary lawsuit. By forcing this matter to be settled in court over a missed deadline, we delay our goal and waste valuable community resources of time, money, and housing. I urge the board to consider the totality of circumstances involved in this matter and that lifting the stop work order and allowing the work to be completed gets us to the goal the quickest. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to be heard if I could.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Attorney Will McKinley. I'm with the Min Law Firm. I'm sitting in my office live here in Appleton. I represent Chris Schmeltz, who you heard at the kickoff of the meeting. And no, he and I did not coordinate our outfits this evening, unbeknownst to me. I just wanted to speak briefly to clarify one thing with respect to what Chris is bringing up. And I think the village board is somewhat familiar with kind of the underlying issue here. From an attorney perspective, my biggest concern is that the current stop or the takedown order that was issued by the village administrator under the sign code itself doesn't necessarily provide for a clear path for an appeal. And the zoning code itself would typically, we'd go to the Board of Appeals, but under the code, the way it's written is such that it's very unclear what our path is here to challenge this decision, at least procedurally. And so in addition to the reasons that Chris articulated, which is this issue with the sign is part of really an underlying much bigger problem that we would like to just work with the village to resolve. So there isn't litigation or anything of that nature, save the taxpayers' dollars. But on the flip side, my concern is if that can't be worked out collaboratively, I don't know what the process is for an appeal in this circumstance with respect to the signage. So my request of the village is to the board is to stay any enforcement action, at least until I can work with Attorney Nesbitt or whoever the village is going to be using to make sure we're following the process rights here to, again, avoid additional litigation then on a due process issue, not to mention the contractual issue with respect to the development agreement. So this is messy, I guess is my point. And I'm just hoping that cooler heads can prevail and we can just figure out a mutual path forward to resolve this issue satisfactory to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Is Dave Leno out there? Can you go on to number 6?
He is not.
Okay. We will go to 7. Presentation, workforce housing study.
Okay, so last December, the board authorized a housing study done for the Wiltsey property. Basically what had happened, there had been a land acquisition committee that was put together and had looked at the site back in 2021 and early 22. And they came up with some ideas. The board authorized the housing study to kind of take it to the next level to say what type of housing should be out there. The board at that time did say it should be workforce housing, but they didn't know how much, they didn't know what the numbers showed. They wanted to see a plan for the property, so they authorized the housing study. The housing study is now complete. So we have, Stantec Consulting, which is the firm that was hired to complete it. We do have them here. Tom Layton, the man who actually, did the text portion, the study portion of it, has another commitment, so he's not with us. So Skylar Wittalson from Stantec will give us just a really brief intro on the text side of it and some of the numbers and some of the questions that came up at the Parks meeting. And then Spencer Cox, who did a lot of the economic research, he will go through the slides that are in, some of the slides that were in that housing study, just to see if there's any questions. I'll give a brief update on a public input session we had, and then Skylar will come back and visit the concept plan that will be going to the Plan Commission and then back to the parks. And there's some committees involved that have to look at this, but with that, Skylar, do you want to just start with some of the numbers or some of the questions that were asked at parks?
Sure. So I'm Skylar Wittalson from Stantec. I'm from the local office here in Sturgeon Bay. The main housing planning study was done by, as Julie mentioned, my coworker, Tom Layton, who's from Twin Cities. So we've got Spencer, who also authored this. He'll be coming in after me via Zoom to answer some of the more specific questions, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the main text of the report here, which you've had in front of you. Perhaps you've perused it, read through it a little bit. I just want to hit some of the main big points of this report. I think what really tells the picture is table 1 gives us a estimation of demand for ownership housing. And there's a number in there, which is 622 people. That number really tells the story of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Is that people or is that households?
That is people, and it's 622 people. So yes, if you assume that perhaps 1 or 2 people, if husband and wife work together in Sister Bay, this could account as somewhat of a duplicitous.
It's labeled as households, which I would think would be a group of people, so thank you.
Yes. Yep. So 622 people live outside of the village of Sister Bay, but work within it. And obviously this number, it encompasses a whole ton of people. It's people that live outside of the village, travel here, work here. They may not want to move here, but they do still factor in this demand pool. We've then taken that 622 number and applied a bunch of reductions to it to narrow it down to the numbers that we are looking to actually build the housing for, which is the conceptual layout here. And as you can see as you work through this table 1, we get down to basically 74 people of that 622 are ready, willing, and able to move to this development. 11 of those are ready to go like year 1, as in right now. So that's the number of people we're trying to appease here within the first section of this development. If you flip all the way through to the end on table 5, there is a breakdown of demand estimates per 5-year increment here. It goes from 2024 all the way through 2043, so we got a 20-year span here. You'll see that there's 2 types of ownership needs, both rental homes and actual single-family ownership, owner-occupied homes. The total is a pretty high number. We've got 140, basically 160 single-family homes are needed to be built to appease the demand pool. We've got another almost 100 townhomes, duplexes, quadplexes that could be built also. Those are broken down between ownership and rental. And on top of that, there is another 80 summer help rental apartments, J1 visa type ownership models for this housing area.
And that's over the next 20 years.
It is. It's over the next 20 years. So what we're looking for, and I'll get into it later, my role in this whole main study was the actual conceptual layout design of the property here. So we were really looking at the 2024 to 2028, first 4-year increments. So that is the gist of the numbers. The larger story here, I guess, is that Village of Sister Bay has always had a bit of housing shortage. It's a premier resort destination. Everybody wants to move here. We all know the story, second, third homes on the water for everybody. But what Spencer will get into after this, they've really parsed out the fact that since about 2010 and really in 2016, the short-term rental market has taken a huge slice of the available housing off the market. It's both increased the price point and taken available units completely off the market. That's both single-family residential and apartments. People, we've heard through the study, are renting apartments for basically weekend use. It's not truly a short-term rental, but they rent it as their second home up here so that they can access it on the weekends, thus taking it out of a typical year-round ownership. That's generally the gist of what's in the report. If you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, Spencer can go through the bulk of slides, which are at the end of the report, which answer more specifically certain categories and parameters that we use to.
Denise has a question.
Yes.
Hi, Skylar. I know that you presented last week to Parks and you had said that this is not your wheelhouse and that Tom, is that his name? Who put it together, it's his wheelhouse.
Yes.
Are we going to hear from Tom, or is this the only presentation that the village board is getting?
We have earmarked the public presentation, which is in 2 weeks, as the point at which Tom would give his full analysis of the housing report. So I apologize. I thought that was sort of the main goal. We're aiming for that public session as the main dissemination of information. Therefore, there's a scheduling conflict, but yes, you will hear from me.
Well, some of us can't make that meeting, seeing that we live in a premier resort destination and have to work. I'm just, I guess, a little bit uncomfortable by not having the author present to the trustees. And that's nothing against you. I don't know how anybody else feels. I've read all the words on the paper a couple of times, made a lot of comments, had a lot of realizations, some startling facts in the report. I guess I just really wanted to have a more open dialogue with the person who wrote it. Maybe if I'm the only one and the rest of the board is fine, so be it.
Oh, I have a few questions. Like in this study here, do we have, or do you have an idea of, let's say, the single family homes, townhomes, rental apartments? Do you have an idea of like an approximate square footage of these homes? Do we have an idea of how much it's going to cost to build these homes? Just, to make sure we are meeting the need, and our main goal here is to make truly affordable housing.
Yes.
We do have that, and that's part of what I'll get into later, Lily. I do just want to add to that, Spencer Cox, who is going to be presenting next. He worked with Tom on the study, so don't have Tom, but you have Spencer who gave the data for it or created that data for it. So maybe if we could hear from Spencer, and then we can go back and look at what some of that local data said about what we need. We'll get into that, and then Spencer can, Skylar can then show how that would be laid out.
I guess I'd like to speak to what Denise said. I will be able to make it to that Saturday session. That's fortunate for me. I understand Denise's point that not everybody can. And I do think that we expended a good deal of funds on this study, and I think that's a reasonable expectation to have the author available to the trustees. I don't know if there's any of the trustees.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, this is a big project.
We do have two, we hired Stantec Consulting, and we have 2 Stantec Consulting people here right now to present it to us. So,
I contributed a good amount of the research as well and be happy to answer questions. And if there's other questions that I can't sufficiently answer, I'd be happy to, forward those questions on to Tom as well, and we can come back with responses prior to the public meeting as a way to kind of address that concern. But I also have a pretty strong understanding of the overall market context and the model that went into it. So I'd be happy to answer those questions and see if it's sufficient. And if not, we can problem solve from there, I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of you stepping in and being here, and I think that this is really, I hear you guys, but I think it's totally appropriate that you guys are here to present, and if we have follow-up questions and we need access to the author, I think that's also appropriate. So I don't have an issue with you guys presenting today.
Louise?
I just had a quick question on table 1, Skylar.
Yes.
You presented this at Parks. The total pool demand, the total household is 622. We have 528 households right now today.
Yes.
And I think at the last meeting, we called that out as an inaccurate number. Did anybody go back and look at that?
We did. We asked the Tom Layton, the author of this, to re-verify his numbers, and yes, he says there are 622 people that travel to work in the village of Sister Bay.
So this is where we're having that issue defining between households and people, because that's, to me, a household is not a person. So it seems like maybe there's an accuracy on the word usage on this.
Okay, from my understanding, a single person creates a household, whether that's, one person or a family that moves in. But if you have one person who works in the village here, they'd like to live here, that's a household at its absolute minimum.
so if you look at the asterisk in the chart, it does define it as the worker. So as Skylar is saying, on that line, you're looking at people. So the asterisk says these are Sister Bay workers who live outside of Sister Bay. So you're getting 6. The rest of the chart is looking at households, but that line across is workers.
Well, we go to Tom with his explain that.
Spencer, you do have permission to share your screen if you want to do that.
Sure. I think I do. It says one person can share at a time. I share my screen. Is that one coming up now? Am I screen sharing? Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, a lot of my specialty comes in from the initial data analysis side as well as the market analysis. And then Tom is really focused on strategies. So I'm really happy to be able to present some of the research that we're able to do to understand the market context and demand for this housing product. I'm going to put this into presenter mode here. So the general story that we see within Sister Bay is that the population has been growing really strongly since 2019. And that population growth has really expanded because of COVID-19, because of people relocating to outside of cities to more rural areas. And in general, right, if we look at population change, Egg Harbor and Sister Bay have really been outpacing growth in other locations. In general, if we look at the economic composition of people that live within, that work within Sister Bay, a lot of the jobs are in retail, hotels, food and administration. And in general, these kinds of jobs tend to have lower pay on average than kind of more middle income or higher income jobs that are typical within kind of the new economy in the United States. There's also a pretty solid layer of people that work in kind of middle income, eds, meds, and government. So in general, if we're looking at the general composition of jobs within Sister Bay, we're looking kind of at lower income jobs that in general make housing kind of a difficult aspect to understand. So if we look at kind of where people are working and living, there's actually only a small percentage of people that both live and work in Sister Bay. There's demand for people that would like to live where they are working, but right now there's major obstacles in terms of the ability to find affordable housing to be able to do that. So most people are commuting into Sister Bay from outside locations, while only a small section are living and working within the community. So if we look at Sister Bay's income composition, there is a much higher composition compared to other locations in kind of the lower income brackets. right? From about 20K to 60K in terms of household incomes, there's a much higher percentage. About 45% of people fall into that bracket, as well as an additional 18% falling into the lowest income bracket under $20,000. The city itself lacks, or the village itself lacks, kind of really higher income populations that are full-time residents within the community. So in general, if we're looking at kind of median rent and its growth over time, from 2009, it's kind of grown from about $610 for median rent, all the way skyrocketing to about $1,100 during 2017. The amount of people that are cost burdened, so people that are spending more than 30% of their income on rent, has gone from a low of 20% in 2010 all the way up to greater than 60% of all renters. The cause of that, as we started to look at it, also home values have been increasing pretty dramatically. So home values were kind of on pace with inflation for the majority of the 2010s, but starting with 2020, following trends nationwide, there's been a massive increase in home demand relative to the supply that exists, and that growth in home demand relative to supply has continued to push pressures up. That pricing pressure is highest in kind of the upper tier houses within the community, but across the board, there's been upward pressure on those housing prices that have really moved those prices out of the range of affordability for people that are working within the community. If in general we look at this, and this is inflation adjusted, median rent is the real major issue, is that median incomes have actually gone down since 2009 if we're adjusting for inflation, whereas rents have gone up by about 20% inflation adjusted. And there's this really big peak, right, that happens right in 2016 when rents really start to skyrocket. Home values have kind of kept pace with incomes, but rent itself has really outpaced incomes. And that's when we start to see kind of the rent burden that you see within the community. So severely rent burdened people are people that pay more than 50% of their income in rent. And that's about 40% of the population, which is significantly higher than other comparison locations. Likewise, Sister Bay has a higher percentage of people that are owner cost burdened, so people that are paying more than 30% of their income in their mortgage, and severely owner cost burdened people. The major drivers of this is that, Sister Bay has been adding units, it's been adding multifamily units, but the pace of adding those units hasn't kept up with overall demand. So where's that demand coming from is a real big question. So in general, like other vacation locations, the normal places that are listed as for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use, right? Summer recreational homes, second homes, has hovered between 50 and 60%, even dipped below 50% over time. But the major issue has been the rise in short-term rentals. And so in the ACS, that's usually docked under a category called vacant for rent. So it's vacant units that are for rent, but aren't occupied by a renter-occupied person. And those numbers, as you can see, really skyrocketed in 2016, started coming on board in 2012, skyrocketed in 2016. The number of households that are shifted to short-term rentals, in particular in that time period, far outpaced the number of rentals that were added for general renters. And the consequence of that, if you look at it side by side, is that there's a huge increase in rent because the amount of occupancy, the amount of vacancy rate is extremely low because the demand for those units is really high, as the supply itself has become really constricted as a result of movements moving from for market rent into the short-term rental market. If you look at it from the major apartment buildings, which this data is collected from CoStar, which aggregates data from major multifamily complexes, what you can see here is the vacancy rate was really high for a period of time and has dipped all the way down to literally 0%. And as a consequence of the vacancy rate going down, right, as the vacancy rate goes down, that means you have an increase in demand, supply isn't keeping track, and that allows for upward pricing pressure. And that upward pricing pressure has really shifted rents dramatically upwards and has allowed kind of market rate apartments to, extract more rents because there's just not enough supply to meet the demand in the community. So this produces kind of a major crunch for people that want to live and work within the community and trying to find available housing that meets those needs. The way that we ended up composing this model is that we looked through kind of three different ways. We looked at comparable developments, and there's actually some close comparables in Sturgeon Bay. We looked from a demand pool, so talking about what we were talking about earlier of income earners that live outside but work within the community. And we also took a lot of input from local experts and from community members. So in terms of comparable development, there's a very similar development that's happening at Geneva Ridge and Sturgeon Bay. And these are kind of modest, below market single family homes that are being built on city owned land explicitly for people who work at Sturgeon Bay businesses. Since the September launch, all 3 sites have been built, have been pre-sold, 2 in the first week, and there's really strong interest in future phases. So even though it hasn't really been publicly marketed and on the market for a long time, there's already been a really strong demand for this type of development. There's also been some recent developments of condo duplexes in Fish Creek, and those are also kind of being pursued for more workforce-oriented housing without major subsidies from the public sector. We're looking at our demand model. The way that we start with our demand model is that we start with the kind of Sister Bay worker people, income earners. And we'll work with Tom and time to create better language around this. So we're looking at people that are mortgage eligible. So earners that would qualify for a mortgage based on their income. And we filter it again based on people who see their job as long-term employment. So we estimated about a quarter of people may see their job in Sister Bay as a long-term employment choice rather than kind of a seasonal job that people take on in between different phases of their life. So people that really want to invest in the community, work in the community, and be a member of the community. Of those 60 households that we narrowed it down from the broader pool, we believed and estimated about 20% might feel both the flexibility and interest in a given year to move into a new home in Sister Bay. So that's how we kind of came up with this broader market pool. And that broader market pool is expanded by thinking about the different kinds of product types that we can have on the property. So there's a range of pricing diversity from single family detached homes that are smaller, that make design considerations that allow them to be marketed at a more affordable rate within the community, to townhome and smaller home developments that also can lower the overall cost, market cost of those products. There's also significant demand for rental units, and increasing the rental supply when you have 0% vacancy is a really smart idea to increase the amount of supply within that community. And there are ways of keeping that longer term affordable through different strategies. And while we also looked simply at people that work within Sister Bay, there's expanding that market. I'm sure there's a significant basis of seniors in the community that would also, or outside of the community, that would prefer to live in a more affordable location, especially if it's something that's one level living with more maintenance-free options. So there's a way of expanding kind of this market pool of people that would demand a product that would be offered. So from the demand and product mix, which we talked about a little bit earlier, we kind of broke it down to a phased development process. So if we think about 16 homes a year, right, for the first 5-year segment, we believe that there's sufficient demand to absorb kind of the single family homes and townhomes within that process, as well as increasing kind of rental apartments in the short term to address the real crunch that's happened within the rental market and that continues to exist right now. And if we think about longer term phasing, then we're adding about 5 to 6 units a year in the single family homes and about 2 units per year in additional demand moving forward. So the numbers that you see at the bottom are over a 20-year horizon, and thinking about those in terms of phased development. So the demand environment, the housing and vision for Sister Bay will address kind of really acute local needs, right? There's like a really strong demand and a deficit of affordably priced housing, both ownership and for rental. The demand has not been matched by increases in supply. And the lack of modestly priced housing suggests that there's like this really big need for that within the community. So we can really expand that by kind of thinking about both the ways in which that product is built and expanding the market for who would be interested in moving into those places. So in a recent case study, right, the Geneva Ridge project that's down in Sturgeon Bay, the city owned the property in which it was developed on, and they contracted with Portside Builders to build 24 homes on the property. The city will subdivide the land and provide street and utility infrastructure for the development. And there's also deed restrictions on the property that home buyers will be bound by working within, need to be full-time employees of a Door County business. And they will also be deed restricted that once they own the home, that home is for their occupation rather than for short-term rentals or for renting out that market. Telluride in Colorado in the Rockies is another example of a place that is really housing constrained for local workforce needs. And one of the ways in which they've developed housing for a local workforce is building on donated land, using modular and factory built methods to reduce the cost of those, to make sure that the units that are provided for ownership are both a high quality, but also more affordable for people within the workforce range. And they also use a capital fund to help fund that construction at lower rates that's been raised by people within the community. So not only are they subsidizing the construction of that process, but they also help people on the demand side that help people with lower rate mortgages to secure those houses, to provide down payment assistance and cost to deed programs to help people acquire those homes, even if they're lacking some of the upfront costs or some of the upfront capital required for a down payment. So there's some of these restrictions that kind of really target housing specifically for people that are working in that community. So these kind of examples help provide some strategies that we've been kind of came together to address financing. So these financing tools are not coming out from the taxpayer, but instead come from a couple of different approaches. So there's value capture approaches. So tax increment financing, and that leverages the future increase in property taxes to help fund some upfront costs of a project. But there's alternative approaches to value capture that can be developed. The municipality and other taxing jurisdictions could use new property tax revenues to create a fund that would help capitalize construction costs. And there's other ways in which the city could use city-owned land, from land and utility contributions to community development block grants and federal fund allocations, municipal bond financing, to increase ways of helping lower the cost of the construction and development of those properties so they're affordable for people earning workforce incomes. There's other ways of reducing costs, including tiny homes or modular home construction that produce a really high quality product, but are really focusing on creating a product that can be brought to market at a lower cost. And finally, there are mechanisms for homeowner support. So with a local lender, there's ways of securing below market mortgages, and there's homeowner programs that can support prospective buyers with credit enhancement services or down payment assistance. There's also kind of, the rent to buy model or contract for deed programs that allow home purchasers to make purchases until the home value provides sufficient collateral to support a mortgage. So overall, the big picture, right, is that there's a huge demand, really strong demand locally for more housing, in particular workforce housing. The supply of that is completely non-existent, largely as a consequence of the short-term rental market, but also because the demand has continued to outpace the supply as people have shifted in working habits and where they choose to reside. So in general, the major issue is how do you increase the supply of those, increase the supply of affordable housing long term. I believe this is a strong program to do so. Let me end the slideshow here. I can turn off the slides, but I can answer questions about the broader presentation or about some of the other local case studies or some of the other data that was involved in that composition of that report. We can do that now, or is the purpose to bounce back for a little bit more presentation on the actual development of the property?
Let's take some questions now if we have them, Spencer.
Sure.
I guess a comment I'd like to make is I would really appreciate it if you guys clarified table 1, because it is confusing how it's laid out there for the public presentation. So you're labeling households, and people. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, based on the presentation showing the 600 people down to 60, the ones that the group that can afford, or the ones that can't afford, the ones that are likely to want to stay because it's a long term. It came down to about 60 people, I would assume, not household, but 60, but whatever, call it 60 households. But why are we doing, why would the village take this on its own? Seems like Northern Door County has this issue, all the villages, all the communities. Right? I mean, we can agree or not agree, but I think it's a bigger issue. And if we're all doing it, it would make more sense to form a collective of all the villages to try this, because Sturgeon Bay had one of their case studies with Sturgeon Bay. And if I heard it right, there's a deed restriction where if the person were to leave Sturgeon Bay, they no longer can live in that house, I would assume. Oh, but how limiting is that? If you don't do it as a county, this person that lives there might have an opportunity to go to Egg Harbor, and God forbid they have to drive 15 minutes to get to a new job that's gonna pay them more and improve their lot in life. Like, these are so restrictive, they bind the person to that village just because they have a job in that village. It seems silly to me. And when you really start thinking about it, that's not what this is about. Like, what, somebody lives in Bailey's Harbor and they're commuting to Sister Bay to work. Has no one ever lived anywhere else where you actually had to drive to work a little bit? That's not even a drive. I just don't understand why we're so insistent on saying, these people are living here, they want to live here, we should make it possible to live right here. It'd be great if they did. But you could say that about me. Telluride can't even be compared to here. I've been to Telluride, and if anybody's been to Telluride, you gotta fly into that place and there's nothing else around it. We have other villages and towns around us. Like, you can drive to get here and you can live in another village. So I think this is before we go too deep into this, we might want to rethink and partner up with Northern Door County or all of Door County. Solve it as a group, solve it as a bigger unit, because we do it village by village and put these restrictions, maybe lock people down. I don't think that's helpful. So that was more, not, it wasn't
This
a
is a
question.
quick,
more of
as a
statement.
quick point, Don, the deed restriction was for working at a Door County business and not a Sturgeon Bay business. But I understand your understanding of that as a larger regional issue, and that makes a lot of sense.
We'll talk a little bit about the deed restriction that's on there, because it is alluded to when you're looking at the implementation tools. So what happens is the community puts in all the infrastructure, and to keep that cost low, they have to recoup those fees over your taxes over a number of years. So you have to, let's say that it's $30,000 to actually develop that property, and you're paying $3,000 a year in taxes. That means it takes 10 years to pay that back. So they have a deed restriction that you have to live in that home basically long enough to pay that debt. And if you decide to leave before then, well, then you just pay that off. So that's how it is. That's how they're keeping the homes low.
Who has to pay it off?
The homeowner.
So the person that can't afford a house has to pay $30,000 to get out of the house? In that case,
No, they would be paying the
$3,000 a year,
remainder
10
of
years.
because there's a deal. It's like, we're gonna give you this home, whatever, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 below market than what anybody else would get a home for. But we wanna make sure you stay there and aren't turning around and flipping it and making a profit. So there's deed restrictions.
But if
put on.
there's somebody who they can move, if they leave and someone else moves in, can't that transfer to the new owners?
So City of Sturgeon Bay does have a mechanism where they complete their case in front of their board to do exactly that. Say,
Yeah, okay.
this is why I'm leaving, I'm going here, I'm not
Yeah.
selling it for profit, someone's moving in, and usually they've said they'll.
I mean, that is
those
ludicrous, right,
transactions.
to not allow that, I mean.
I mean, doesn't the Door County Housing Trust already kind of have this solved to be sold, what, 8 lots to?
No, it's a different model. So in that model, you own the home and they retain the land is what happens. And so that's how they're keeping it, affordable, because they limit what you can resell it for.
I mean, I guess we're getting down to the high level.
Yeah.
We're solving a housing issue that way. Like, whether it's this tool or this tool, it's still solving the issue. Do we need to reinvent the wheel to accomplish that?
So I think the rabbit hole we're kind of going down is the implementation phase of the plan, which, we will come up with that. We'll be bringing policies forward and all of that. So these are just the models that are out there on how communities are keeping it affordable. It is a different model than the housing trust. So when you're looking at it, because in this one, you are owning your home. You're actually owning the home. You're owning the land. You are getting at a reduced rate by agreeing to stay there long enough to pay us back, so to
So
speak.
then I think you're also leading us sort of on that rabbit hole though, because let's just stay at the high level there and say we're trying to address housing. Let's not try and go to the mechanism then at that point. The other thing I gotta tell you, Don, is somebody that does live in Sister Bay and goes to Bailey's Harbor less than half of the time by car. So don't presume it's always a car. I gotta push back on that.
Listen, I think it's apples and oranges. I don't think
Yeah,
that's important. You can
but,
walk
yeah.
there as far as I care.
Yeah.
But
So,
I think though, also, that from 600 and something households that commute in today to the 60 people, so we have about, so 10% of those people right now, we're thinking might want to live here if they could, because they have, I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at significant minority of the people that are working here that from coming in from outside, it's 10% of them. And there's no requirement that anybody has that they have to live here, right? I mean, they could live in Liberty Grove if there were, like in Telluride, they said, I think I heard somebody donated land to build on. I don't know who did that. I don't know if it was the government. I don't know if it was a landowner. I mean, it just seems like there might be, this might work. This might be a great thing. It could work at Sister Bay, great. But it just seems like, why solve it by ourselves if there's communities 5 miles from us that also are dealing with this, that we can solve it together. I don't know, maybe you guys are talking to other communities and villages about this, or maybe they're not even addressing it. I don't know.
Don, being around for a while up here, not forever, but just a little while, there's been a lot of efforts to do things between municipalities, and I don't think any of them have ever really got off the ground over years and years. The Door County Housing Trust is one that has, but it hasn't done it with the support of the municipalities. I think that it would be great to work with other municipalities. I would welcome that wholeheartedly, but I think that we're going to be waiting a long time before any of that ever comes to fruition.
Don't they have the same pain points for their businesses with affordable housing and employees? I mean, they're all dealing with that, right?
They do, but, for example, for Liberty Grove to do something like this, they would need the land, they would need to have it on sewer, or even if they partnered with us on this, they would need to have the resources to put into it.
I'm not asking for us to start over. It's just something else. It just dawned on me when I was listening to the presentation that are we doing this by ourselves? But anyway,
There was a study done a number of years ago that looked at Northern Door as a whole and said this is what Northern Door needs. And that's kind of when the housing trust picked up, like, because there was like, we need to do something here, but
Look at how many
I
units
agree,
have been built in Northern Door County and how many of them have been built in Sister Bay. And that's because there's been a lot of resistance to housing units getting built in other areas. You hear about it, you hear about it in Gibraltar. And that's not even having the municipality work on it. That's just in general units. They've just made it more difficult and shot many projects down.
yeah, it's Sister Bay and Sturgeon Bay that are actually, when you look at the chart or the data, are the ones that are leading the charge on housing. So I'll keep it moving forward just real quick, just to answer some of the questions. I know, Lily, that you had the price point, well, it depends on the size of the home. We had surveyed, we had a public session. We asked the people that would be using these homes to come in and talk to us. And we had a pretty good turnout. We had anywhere from 58 to 64 households respond to us. And just some things that really struck out, which lead to what Spencer's going to talk about. But we had, just real quick, we had 18 single member households that were looking for housing. We had 16 2-member households looking for housing. We had 10 3-member households, 8 4-member, and then we had 5+, which was 8 of them were looking for that.
And that's immediate, like they're looking for it in the next near term.
Right.
Okay. What's
And
that
then-
total?
Well, we had 58 to 64 households.
Okay.
So we had talked to them about, their ideal home sizes and everything. And it was interesting, like the smallest people wanted was 2-bedroom. Even if you were the only person in that home, they wanted 2-bedroom. I'm guessing they're thinking about resale or growth. We did talk with a developer, Skylar set it up, who showed us examples of some smaller homes they could build that they could keep that price point down there.
It was shown 1,100, 1,200 square foot ranches that were about $250,000. Some of these we'd like to actually get below that. But, you know, when we met with these people, they were talking about what type of homes they wanted. There was ranch, craftsman, and then we had some of them asking for the granny flat idea where they moved here, mom is with them. Can they have a unit in back for mom, or can they use that unit in back to perhaps offset the mortgage that they would be paying? So that all leads into the subdivision that Spencer or Skylar has up there. Every household we surveyed at that meeting, they all 100% preferred a conservation subdivision over a conventional subdivision. In other words, they didn't want the cookie cutter lot. They wanted the parkland and the green land and the green space. The 1 and 2 family homes preferred it almost unanimously. All households prefer space on site for parking versus on street, which adds a little bit, you know, you're putting asphalt on the lot and driveways, but that's what they wanted. One-way streets were okay. No one objected to living on a one-way street. The design conclusion that we looked at with that was it could save money, but if clustering, it could also add costs. We asked them, you know, how would you spend your money if you had all this money and you could spend it on whatever you want in your neighborhood, what would it be? And the number one thing they asked for was sidewalks. The second was playground. The third was trails. The other thing that there was a high interest in was they overwhelmingly all said yes, regardless of the size of the household, wanted community gardens in their neighborhood. So based on the work that was done by the Ad Hoc Land Acquisition Committee, based on this public input session, and then based on the data from the plan, Skylar put together just a concept layout. Like I said, this has to go to the Plan Commission and Parks and they have to tweak it and work on it, but to show you what that could look like, Spencer, do you want to, or Skylar, I keep calling you Spencer. Skylar, do you want to just walk through what that could look like?
Yeah, and I was here too, stuff like colorized right before the meeting, that didn't have time to shoot up to you. Sorry. Yeah. So this is the conceptual layout we came up with, and as Julie said, at the public input session, people sort of gravitated towards 3 types of homes.
Scott, I'm
Yeah.
going to interrupt you real
Yep.
quick. Can you pull that up, Heidi, so that the people that are on Zoom can actually see it as well?
So the one that I have does not look like that.
I put it in the packet today.
Probably
Yeah.
looks like this one.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it gave me. Yeah, so that's what.
This one I just put some bigger words on it, so it's easier to see in presentation. Let me know when you got her up.
Well, why is it not sharing? There we go.
Okay. So we split it up between 3 types of single family residential: ranch, the granny flat, which is just an accessory dwelling unit on site, and the cottage or craftsman style. The ranch seemed to be the more desirable of the home styles. It's also one of the kinds that is more able to be modified for sizing considerations. Generally, if you have a 2-car garage, you got like a 20 to 24 foot section right there. And then if you go 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom, they sort of increase in width, which we've shown in the yellow here. You can see we have a 75-foot wide ranch, 80, 85, and 90, and those are just front widths, and that helps space out the lots here. We did do as much as we could for a conservation subdivision where we've sort of grouped the types of homes in certain areas, and also offered them on some dead-end cul-de-sac areas. So you have sort of groupings of homes in certain areas. We weren't able to accomplish a full conservation subdivision just because generally conservation subdivisions are on more of a grand scale. If you have 40, 60, 80 acres, you have a 10 to 12 unit chunk of houses on one corner and the rest is green space. we could do that here, but you would lose a lot of availability for housing, for building areas, so we sort of shot for the middle ground there. We also have, along with the single family, 3 types of single family residence. We have a townhome area. Those could be duplexes, quadplexes, potentially apartments. We didn't really approach the apartment complex area in this because that comes with this whole set of issues, who owns it, who rents it. Townhomes generally can be owner occupied or owner rented out. And we also have a dorm style area down here, which is sort of behind the wastewater treatment plant. And that was earmarked for summer, short-term employees, J1 visa type people. We've got, shows it better on some of the other ones that aren't colorized, but it shows an apartment complex sort of in the middle with very small cottages ringing the outside of it. As for overall layout of the subdivision, we started with one main through street going from Scandia to ZZ. We've created some 90-degree bends and some curvilinear portions in here, so it's not a straight through street. It's not going to be a racetrack. People move fairly slow through it. From that, we teed off into 2 separate cul-de-sac areas. Cul-de-sac and dead-end streets are generally pretty high on the desirability scale, just because of how private it is for people who live on those areas. We have park areas interspersed throughout the entire site. We have one large central park area. We have a lot of park area earmarked along the western edge, which actually will double as stormwater retention areas. The land generally slopes from the easterly direction towards the wastewater treatment plant down slope. So everything is going to drain this way. So we have earmarked this area, all of these corner lot areas as potential greens area and stormwater detention. With all of these parks, we have an interconnected trail system that runs along the backsides of all the lots through the center green aisle areas and around the outside of the property. It also connects with a dual sidewalks on each of the streets. So you have full connectivity from any lot. If you step out of your house, you can walk or bike. You can be a pedestrian and you can get anywhere within this subdivision. From a utility standpoint, we have obviously the wastewater treatment plant right here. This whole area actually works very well for gravity drainage, which will reduce your cost for utility infrastructure. We've got pretty good pressures for water system, meaning that we can serve probably this entire area as phase 1 or phase 1 and 2 build out without any sort of extra booster pumps or reservoir systems. We do have generally this 40 on the east side earmarked as phase 3 development. We didn't really know. We sort of have to go through the process here to figure out how the initial phase is going to look, what's going to sell, what your price points are, so that you can start planning out your phase 2 area. And also from a timeline perspective, obviously this is going to take 5-10 years for full build out. So at that point, you want to have open areas so that you can potentially alter your plans and change your goals if the situation arises.
Skylar, that part to the east also needs a water tank
Yep.
or something to serve it, correct?
Exactly. And this area becomes high enough that there's big enough difference in elevation that your water pressure is going to drop. So you're going to need to put some additional infrastructure up there, a water booster and reservoir system, which isn't cheap. So our first goal here was to try and serve this with existing utility and infrastructure in the cheapest possible manner. This is obviously still conceptual. We're working through Parks Committee and Plan Commission. From a phasing perspective, this is ultimate phase 1 build out, but we think that phase 1A or phase 0 will probably be this first section of ranch single family homes potentially extending all the way over to this duplex townhome area. It's very easily served by utilities. It's a single, you can put a single road in, whether you go all the way through on the first go around or just put a cul-de-sac at the end for the time being. You can then develop off of that main stretch and have a good slug of homes built and start your economics of recouping some of your costs by sales. So that's the general outline of what we're looking at for conceptual layout. Any questions or comments or?
Denise has a question.
Yes.
How many acres does the plan that you have developed encompass out of the 52, Skylar?
I think this is right around 35 to 38 acres.
Okay. And how long are the cul-de-sacs?
Oh, that is, we'll scale here. So the one that comes up to the right, which would be the south, is about 250 feet. And then the double leg one is also, it's like another 300 foot to the north and then 300 feet going back west. So 600 feet altogether.
Thank you.
I have some thoughts and comments on it, but I think it's better served at Plan Commission because we're getting down to weeds and all that. I will just tell you, permeable barriers, cul-de-sacs, let cyclists and pedestrians through.
Okay.
Just a comment, I really do appreciate the trail system connecting kind of throughout. I think that is really, I love that. And the sidewalks, more and more green, I would say, the more green we can have, the better. I mean, you have a lot, and I'm trying to think back on other neighborhood studies or development studies, like what percentage of parks versus, you know, development. And I don't know if we have that calculation, but I think that's just, you know, boulevards, and the more green we can have, obviously the better. But I like how this is, I like the direction it's going.
Okay, yeah, that was definitely one of our main points, was connectivity and green space throughout, so I think we did hit that fairly well. Overall plan here.
Mickey?
And were you able to utilize the summary report on the ad hoc acquisition committee in your?
Is that the Wiltsey report from about a year ago? I got it about a month ago, and I read through it. I don't have it in front of me, but I know there was a lot of asks, I guess, on there, which were not germane to our scope of services at this point. One of the main ones was offering, obviously, single-family residential houses for a price point that no normal person can afford, and I think that's, we have accomplished this year. So, yes, in a way, yes. Other questions? Comments?
Sounds good. Thank you, Scott.
Keep this here now.
Nate, I have a question for Julie.
Yes.
So now that we have this plan, and data and analysis on where we need to be or the demand is over the next 20 years, what does Julie see as our next step?
So a couple of things, we have some parallel tracks. One is we need to amend our TID so that we can capture some of this development in there. Meanwhile, we also need to continue to refine the conceptual plats so we know about where those roads are and how long they are, so the engineer can design the roads. And not thoroughly design them at this point, but at least to the point where we can get some prices. so that we can begin, writing for grants through USDA or some of those other funding sources to see how far we can make our money stretch. That part involves planning and parks to kind of come up with a concept plan that Skylar can then start doing some engineering off of. Also at that time point, meeting with, I think, developers to try and get the cost of the home as low as possible. This spring, I'd also like to meet with, have a presentation for homeowners, to meet with banks, see what they qualify for, see if they're eligible for down payment assistance, first-time home buyer assistance, and some of those programs that are out there. So they know what they can afford. And when we are ready, once we have the cost of our engineering, when we know how much money we have to spend actually on those roads, we can proceed with installing those roads, laying out the lots. Developer can work on, the builder can actually work on the homes, selling them to people that are qualified, and just keep the process moving that way. Is that a lot? But I mean, it's a lot of things moving at the same point, but this coming year, especially this spring, I think the big thing is figuring out what it's all gonna cost, and you can't do that until you start doing some engineering out there.
Well, it seems like parks and plan need to get their hooks into this to figure out exactly what we want to do, because we can't have any sort of engineering plan without deciding what direction to go. I mean, I understand broad brushstrokes, this looks reasonable, but there's a lot of other stuff that's been talked about at plan, namely cluster housing, that I think could really change how this could look and get us a little bit more density in there.
Could we get from the banks, or we can probably look this up online, but information on some of these programs that offer a first-time home buyer assistance, down payment assistance and such. Certain types of homes don't qualify.
Right.
So if we could have that information on hand, just to make sure that the type of development we're working on, that they qualify for these assistance. So we're not putting these families in a position where, they're ready to buy a home, but they don't qualify for the down payment assistance, and then they back off,
Right. Some of the other things we talked about in the plan that, we do have to work on as well, is kind of the angel investor network, where let's say you do not qualify for the mortgage, there is somebody who is willing to, I'm gonna say, buy, sponsor, land contract that home to the family. So somebody has money, they're willing to pay to have that home built. They then land contract to somebody at perhaps 8%, and they're making, it's an investment for them. And then that person does the land contract, which is like a rent to own, until it is paid for, or until they can go to the bank and get a mortgage and pay it off. So there's those options too, we've looked at a gamut, for those people that don't qualify or can't qualify, how are we going to be able to help them? And so there's a lot of those programs that, we've had a lot of discussions on over the last 3-4 months, and it's time to, once we get, this finalized, move on to that phase, and that is, what are these really creative, unique programs to help get these people into these homes?
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a question. My question is, well, first of all, I think it's great that we are going in this direction. It's totally needed. But after listening to what Don was saying too, I know it seems to be falling all on Sister Bay. How is this going to affect the residents' taxes? Are our taxes going to go up because we're doing this project? And I know there's all these different funding and bonds and such like that, but the bottom line, how is this going to affect the people that live here and their taxes?
It should help your taxes go down in a perfect world. So we have already budgeted a certain amount for the infrastructure. The goal is to write if we don't get a grant, we only do so much, but the goal is to write a grant to extend that further, put more infrastructure in, to take the money we have and match it, to extend it, to do more with it. We do not pay for the price of the homes. That is the buyer that is doing that. They will be paying taxes. As you know, the more people you have paying into a pool, that helps keep the prices down or the taxes low. So that should help as well. And then with the TID, of course, eventually you're gonna see returns on that, which that money can then be used to help pay for other things. This project, if done correctly, should not be a burden on the taxpayer. I mean, even when they start looking at connecting to sewer and using sewer and water, you're not paying that. They're paying utility rates that are paying for all of that. Their bills are paying for any expansions or work that is being needed to provide that service to them. So this should not be, other than this initial investment that you have in the infrastructure, this should not be a burden on the taxpayer.
I would also say it's our responsibility to make sure that that is the case moving forward, because things can change in the future and we have to make sure we keep an eye on it. We're paying attention. It's our responsibility.
Are we saying that all of the homes here would fall under affordable housing, or are we saying this is a mixed model?
This is all workforce housing, which we say
All
affordable.
of it.
It's not, yeah, it's not planned. Well, with the exception of that little purple block for the businesses that are looking for seasonal in J1, the remainder of it is all workforce housing. None of it is marketed, or none of it is planned as low income housing.
Okay, does it have to be, has it already been decided it has to all be workforce housing?
That was the direction that was given to us last year when when the board said they wanted it to be workforce housing. They were like, we don't want to talk about senior housing out there.
Okay.
We want it all to be workforce housing in the study. And then that's exactly what the study supported. The study said, yeah, you have a problem. You don't have enough workforce housing. And yes, this property can support everything that you need.
How would we, in the unlikely scenario, or don't know, if we have workforce housing and we, have the need for employees for our businesses here. What if the people that move in here go to work in other villages? And so we put all this infrastructure in for workforce housing for our businesses here in Sister Bay, and everybody's working in other villages because there's no restrictions on that. And I don't think we can tell people that they're buying a house here, they have to work here.
Yeah, I guess I don't view that as a bad thing, Don, because that person that lives here, they're coming home at the end of the day. They're shopping here, they're spending their money here.
But now you're gonna have to answer to the business owners who this project is supposed to be supporting. That's just a question, think about it.
I think these are, as this process moves along, we need to be mindful about putting appropriate restrictions in. Can we go too far? Yes. Can we go with too little? Yes. We need to make sure we find that balance.
I'm curious.
I think it's an important thing to think about as we're moving forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, because I don't look at it as housing for businesses. I look at it as for housing for the workers, you know, regardless of where they are. Because a lot of times maybe the husband's working in Fish Creek, but the wife is here. So, but I understand that, you know, the part that we're really focusing on the businesses is that purple block, because we had a meeting with the businesses. And what they told us was their real need is the seasonal housing, the seasonal apartments. That was what they're like, look, we can't afford to buy some of them, or we can't afford to buy homes for them, but we need something that, you know, affordable apartments. And so we talked about ones that maybe are not, I don't want to say built the best, because that's the wrong term, but maybe they're electric heat instead of forced air, and some of those things that where you can help maybe reduce the price of it, make it more affordable. So, yeah, I guess we'll see how it goes as we move forward with that. How they feel.
Nate?
Denise?
So the other question that I have is, I think Julie referenced it as like the implementation stage, and I don't necessarily want to go down this rabbit hole, but I guess I want to have my question answered. And that is, I think that there's a lot of different models out there, and I agree with you on not reinventing the wheel. But which model are we going to follow? Who is going to do all of that research to choose a model? Who is it going to be presented to? Who is going to fine tune it? Because I do not believe that that is the Plan Commission's role at all. And, you know, before a shovel ever meets the ground, in my opinion, we need to know exactly what our model is. And
Yeah,
who does that?
Yeah, that same thought, Denise, is we do need to have someone do that. I mean, does that just end up being the village board? Cause I don't know that we want another subcommittee to go and chase that down, but we should know what our plan is on the financial model, so without the finances, none of this works.
Yeah, I view that as something between myself and the engineer trying to come up with that and presenting it to the board.
I do like the idea of a committee, Nate, I'm sorry. And then I have a request of you, Nate, and that is, would you be willing to give the floor to Miles? Sorry to catch you off guard here, Miles, but because you did send us a summary of the committee that you worked on, is there anything that you would like to say or share, or does anybody have any questions?
You beat me to the punch, Denise. I was gonna see if
What?
Luis wanted to say anything about that since they were both on that committee. I also want to speak to that report being in there. I don't know that all of the board members had seen that prior to this being sent out. And I think it was a lot of work that was done that necessarily didn't get buttoned up fantastically, but until Miles just did it. But there was a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of community input on that. So, yeah, Miles, would you like to say anything?
Well, there's a few things that, I mean, I think the work that Rebecca Kerwin and Mariah Good and Amy Conley at United Way did and presented in Sister Bay 4 years ago might be really good to revisit. I don't know if a lot of the existing board members were around then, but that had a lot of this data in it and probably a little more specific analysis and things for that. And that built off of the county-wide housing study.
Was that presented at the village hall?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
I remember that one.
And Sister Bay's village board at the time did stop a meeting and came over to see the presentation, which was great because only 2 communities in the county did that, Sturgeon Bay and Sister Bay, to Sister Bay's credit. The things that Wiltsey came up with, and well, I say Wiltsey, the ad hoc land acquisition committee, there's a couple things that I think are important in that report. This just comes out of my coverage of other communities, but the town of Gibraltar tried to do some housing near their wastewater treatment plant. And I believe the DNR, they found out that there was some obscure thing that you can't build a housing unit within 750 feet of that plant. I don't know if that's been visited in this study at all, but that kind of squelched that plan. So that was something that I didn't know about even when we were on the Wiltsey committee until the end. So I'd look into that. Some of that stuff about the conservation subdivision. I know Paula's got a subdivision right down the road here on a 10-acre lot, so you don't need a massive acreage to do a conservation subdivision. Cottage Glen is another great example of one that has come up in a lot of our housing discussions, and that's a really beautiful property up in Liberty Grove, where they've got a conservation subdivision. One of the things that Wiltsey talked about, that committee, And this was because of Dick Burris and Fuzzy Sundstrom and the knowledge that they have going back decades in Sister Bay, was that there's been a long-standing need going back to the 80s where people felt the village needed a secondary road around Sister Bay. And they didn't accomplish it back then. Since then, the population has grown by about 400 residents, and Sister Bay went from being kind of an afterthought in tourism to the #1 tourism destination in the county. And you still don't have that bypass. And if you build out at Wiltsey, this was part of our committee's discussion. If you build out there, you have to do something to not send all of these new housing units to the Mill Road and Husby's intersections. Because every single one of those people that live in those houses is going to need to turn left on Highway 42 in the middle of the summer to go get groceries. So you can't really, I don't think you can develop that unless you have the other thing first, because you're going to have, think of how much people are upset now about the perceived congestion in Sister Bay. Add 100 to 200 to 300 housing units east of town, and that's going to get exponentially worse. So if you don't have that as part of this plan, I think you're just going to have really upset people. I worry about the cost, and it'd be really interesting to see how it works, because if you take our work was based on, we were told the village wanted to put the admin building, that they needed more land for the wastewater treatment plant, and that the post office had to go out there. That was the baseline of what we started with. What else should that land be used for? So we thought, well, if all those things are going out there and you're building roads anyway, let's do some housing and let's increase recreational opportunities for everybody in the village. So, but we quickly learned that Public Works did not need more land for wastewater treatment facility. And the post office was not interested in moving out there. So that left the admin building, and now the admin building isn't supposed to go out there. So now all of the infrastructure costs on that have to be borne by those housing units. And I've tried to run the math. Even if you capture everything, just for $3.5 million of infrastructure, if that ends up being that much, I don't know how it ever pays for itself. And that's not to say you shouldn't do it, but you gotta, because I've been involved in housing, I've been covering it for 25 years and in a bunch of committees on housing, but you'd really have to run the numbers on how you're going to come close to paying for that, because even if you get 100 units built in the first year and every property tax dollar they pay, it will never pay for that road. It'll take 70 years to pay for that road unless you get massive grants to offset the cost of that road. And if it takes 70 years, you're going to have to replace that road twice in the time that you pay for the first one. So you got to really think about how you can do that efficiently, and if maybe there's grants there. But again, even if you take that TID, that means none of their tax dollars are going to all the other services that they're consuming in the village as well. So that, I would really want to work that out. And again, our committee is 100% in favor of doing housing. But you do have infrastructure that you just built and paid a bunch of money for behind the pig, that maybe it's best to make the most out of that infrastructure before, because you already built it. So every single extra housing unit you get there at this point is almost free to the village. So if you can incentivize people to do more dense development up there, you might be able to address a lot of this before you fall into debt on this one. And that goes into paying back on the other stuff you built. But I'd also look at those models. There's 5 organizations that have done significant work on housing up here. There's the Housing Partnership, which has a great model. There's what Marissa Downs has done with WIDA subsidies. There's Habitat for Humanity, which for the longest time was the only one to do anything. There's what Paul is trying to do, and there's the Community Foundation and their $3.5 million revolving loan fund for innovative efforts at affordable housing. So those are all not in this study, and I'm kind of, to me, that makes it seem a little incomplete to me, in that there's a lot of local things being done. How can those be part of this? So I also felt like I think we talk a lot more about cluster development and preserving more density in certain areas and more green space out on that property. those lot sizes seem too large to make them affordable, and probably an inefficient use of that land for what we talked about. I think you get a lot more out of it. If you do build those roads, you can get a lot more out of those roads. So housing, the funding thing is going to be difficult no matter what. I mean, I think I've done 5 podcasts this year with leaders in Fisher Island, New York, which has a housing trust sort of model, kind of similar to Washington Island. Vail, Colorado, which is very similar to our county. The community foundation's work, Marissa's work. It's really like, it's difficult, but there are models out there. Yeah, that's just a high level look at our work. I think we did focus on trying to put trails and the recreational opportunities, weaving that into there. And I like that that's a part of this plan as it sits now. I just think there's a lot more that could be reworked on it.
Yeah, I think, one of the keys to affordability on this is going to be density. I think that cluster, I mean, we really had some fantastic discussions about their plan. And it's probably the most exciting thing I've talked about a plan in the last 3 years.
One of the challenges we had with, conservation subdivision on this property is there's really nothing to conserve. So, you know, normally you have woodlands, you have ponds, you have areas that you're working around. This was hayfield and winter, is really what it was. We did find some wetlands out there. I don't think when people looked at the property initially, they realized there were wetlands out there, but there are some wetlands out there, so Skylar's map does kind of work around that. He's already had some initial conversation with the DNR about that, and we're looking into those, getting delineations on those, but it's not your traditional property where, you know, where there's something to conserve as you normally would in a conservation subdivision.
I would point
So
out
we have to
that
get creative on that.
orchards and hayfields don't stay orchards and hayfields unless they're maintained over a period of time. Nature will recapture them. There would be something there to conserve if we chose to go that direction.
Well, and that's why Skylar has drawn in there parks and ponds and everything to create conservation areas that you're then putting your housing around. So you don't have it now, so he's building it out there in that plan, and you're gonna put your housing around it.
I'm not an expert on that, but if you know Paula's 10 acres, it's not exactly like, it's not like land trust property. You don't need to be 3 Springs to be a conservation development. It's just basically conserving space for density. Mariah Good knows a lot more about it than I do, but.
Nate,
So-
I have another request.
1 second, you're Don started talking.
Miles brought up some important things, right?
Mhm.
And I just, like, who's capturing those things? Like he mentioned about the road that's needed, right? And he's right. He is correct about that. It's just, when he brought it up, I was like, I just kind of just think, wow, that makes sense. But what's is this done? Is this moving forward? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of questions. Does it go back to the drawing board? Where are we as a board? I'm honestly, I've listened and watched, and there's, you know, the Wiltie committee and this and that. And I guess when Miles was speaking, I was thinking, where are those thoughts captured, and where are they actionable? Like who's moving to a meeting next to get other people together again, is to rethink this. If some of the things he said makes sense for us to investigate, because there's enough people that looked at this and talked about this, and now we're at this position. Where are we going next? What happens next?
I think that's a great question. I think Denise actually was, I'm gonna imagine that Denise's request probably had something to do with that. Denise?
Well, I'll reiterate, I would like to see a committee talk about research all the different kinds of implementation, which Miles talked about. You know, there's 5 different local groups working on that. I would love And I was at that Village Hall meeting with Mariah Good and Becky Kerwin, and I can't remember the other person that was involved in that. It was fascinating, and they also talked a lot about Alice in that. I think I still have in a file somewhere, don't ask me where, the documentation that they handed out that night. I think that would be a really great refresher and a really good conversation. Either if Nate's willing to revitalize the land acquisition committee and that group of people, if they're still interested in doing some of that homework for us, meeting with a committee or making that presentation again to the board. I don't know if they would have, without a lot of time and effort, a lot of updated facts and figures or anything, but even if it was just the same presentation to refresh our minds of those of us that were there, and for everybody to hear about it that's new to the board. It was really, they did a lot of work. It was really, really well done.
Given the importance of this and the financial impact, I actually feel like this, if I have an opinion, would stay at the board level until we get to a point where we are ready to give more direction. So before a committee is formed, my recommendation would actually be to bring that presentation back here and then go from there.
Denise, are you referring to the plan that was, the study that was done by the Door County Economic Development Corporation? I know we've had that here before.
I don't think so.
What Denise is referring to is after that study was done, there was a committee. I was a small part of it. Becky Kerwin, Mariah Good, Marty Olenichik did a ton of work on that. Marty Olenichik is a community development director from the city of Sturgeon Bay. And we did forums in Southern Door, Sturgeon Bay, Gibraltar, and Sister Bay. Basically, the idea was like, how do we get this information in front of everybody and take it to the boards and like make the effort was like, let's try to get people to do stuff. And to Sister Bay's credit, they've done a lot. And I don't want to lose sight of that ever. Like Sister Bay's done more than anybody. And Don brought that up, like, and I think Patrice as well. At some point, like, when does somebody else step up and do something? Which is, you have every right to say that to other communities. But that's what we did, is we took that study and then tried to digest it and put it out in a way that was actionable. That wasn't just like a lot of facts and figures, but made it try and distill it to a way that it connected with local communities. So that's what Becky and Mariah and Marty were so good at.
So Don, I just want to answer your question about who is doing that or who's thinking of those big things. We do have road connections on our adopted plans. We're in the process of updating those plans as well. Actually, this past week, Tasha and I met with Baird to talk about, you know, if we can acquire those routes to go around, how can they be financed? And having those conversations, because there's the obvious connections, but then there's this idea of which Tasha and I met with Baird on. But then there's also this grander one completely around, which is part of a group with Liberty Grove and some people from Gibraltar that they haven't met in a while, but they were looking at a grander route around the Sister Bay. So as community, putting on the community development hat, those are things that I just keep moving forward. There's been the conversations, they're not ready to bring forward. But they should be revisited during the land use plan, so hopefully people still support that idea. And when the land becomes available or the money's available, we can implement that.
Yes, Mickey?
Speaking about land, is it true that the village is acquiring more property tomorrow? Closing on more property?
I'm not sure about Oh, the closing, we have a closing on the, property that we had agreed to, the closing got delayed.
Is it tomorrow or no?
It is tomorrow.
What are we spending on that?
I believe that was $1 million.
Nate, can I ask a question? Is that allowed or not?
Sure, Mike.
After listening to Miles' comments and in light of the feedback, I think you're just starting to hear from residents about property taxes, I think it's going to be imperative that there's transparency, whether we ask Miles to write about this or we find forums to talk with citizens. There's got to be an invoice out there so the taxpayers know what the impact's going to be. And I appreciate that development in a perfect situation can actually reduce property taxes. I agree, I've seen it done. However, there are a lot of risks and unknowns. And you have to be asking yourself when you're looking at the financial model for this, what do we think it's going to cost? What's the upside? I mean, if everything goes well, what can we save? Or if it goes bad and we miss something, how bad can this be? And again, expect great scrutiny based on what's happened this last year with property taxes. It's a big deal. You can't talk to a citizen of Sister Bay right now without hearing about it. So the perception of this will not necessarily be positive until it's explained and understood that it could be a benefit to tax bills, is my point. And I'm not sure that that's intuitive. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think that we probably need to get this out in the open a little bit more. I mean, this is the first time it's been presented to the public, this presentation. And I guess it was at Parks last week, but I think we need to get some feedback on it, because if we don't have stakeholder buy-in on this, we can have the grandest plan, but if the community isn't willing to support it, they'll get rid of us and they'll get rid of this plan.
So we do have a public session scheduled here, a week from Saturday to the general public. That we have been promoting and will continue to promote, to try and get the word out and get people understanding what it's all about. And hopefully we get a good turnout.
Well, that's not the only issue. I think you have to say to people, hey, look, this is going to be an X million dollar project, and then they're going to be more likely to come. If you just show them the good parts and you don't show them the bad parts or the risk, they may not be willing to come. And if it's 4 degrees below zero, you might not get people to come. There may have to be some other ways, creative ways we have to communicate with the community. Otherwise, unfortunately, it'll just be election day.
I have a question.
Patrice.
My question is, when we go, if we go forward with this project, will we be doing it in stages or all at once? Because it seems to me if we just do it like in stages, like development 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of all at once, that might, not be such a hit on the taxpayers.
I guess I think that we're getting quite a ways out there. I think that we should probably refocus on. I appreciate what you're saying, Patrice, and ask ourselves what is the next step on there, because I don't think that we should make that decision tonight, Patrice. I don't see us doing all at once, but I also don't think that we should say what we're going to do there. I think that we need to figure out what the appropriate next step is. Is that to get somebody to get that presentation that was provided the board 4 years ago to us? Or is it to form a committee? I mean, I don't love the forming committee for everything, but this is so darn important. I kind of like what Sarah's saying is let's get a little bit more information and then let's go from there. So my inclination was be see who we can get to talk about this and on a local level. That's just, it's missing from this study. There's not a real local component to this. and talk to the board, and then we can figure out direction from there.
Yeah, I think we're really doubting ourselves here again. Do we need to ask ourselves, we want affordable housing or not?
I think we do. I think we've got to do it right though, because otherwise, if we don't do this right, we've got one go at this. We need to make sure we do it well. I would rather, it's far more important we do it well than we do it fast.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In the age of technology, there's no reason why we couldn't have a forum or a place on the village's website where there's things listed that or questions that the board or administration would like to know people's sentiments about, where people cannot, they can't be there on Saturday. At least they can put in their input and it can be registered. Just a suggestion.
I mean, we could solicit questions like that. I mean, like we've done that through email blasts and whatnot. To put up a forum and all that might be a little overly complicated, but I understand your point about getting people's questions into us so we can try and get that input in there. I mean, we've got a mail list.
Yeah, the smart growth, the rescheduled smart growth or planning meeting, land use planning meeting, that one does have that component where people can, it has a virtual component where people can actually go in and enter feedback and data. Because we are concerned that the weather will be bad and we'll have to cancel again. So it was like, well, we'll have a presentation here, but we'll also have where people can just go on, view something and then get some feedback. So we can include this as part of that presentation. Get specific feedback on this as well.
So my inclination would be to try and get the presentation that was there, and then let's come up with a direction at that point. So we get a little bit more information in front of us. And then we figure out which way to go. Move forward. I can't reiterate enough. It's more important we do this well than we do this fast. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Denise, Patrice?
I want it done right. So I agree with you.
I agree as
Um,
well. Yep.
So should we be reaching out to, I mean, I guess Mariah is probably gonna be the one that could get us in touch with either help, she could probably help us figure out who has got that information and then figure out on updating it.
I have the presentation because I worked at DCDC when all that was going on, but I don't know if they can update it, but I can ask them if they can, and then try and schedule them for next month.
Miles, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I could reach out to Mariah and Becky. Becky put most of that presentation together, and Amy Conley.
Yeah.
But I would like one suggestion I would have is like so much of what I see, and this is not unique to Sister Bay, but it's a lot of communities up here. There are not great ways that communities have dialogue with the residents. It's a lot of formal. You take the input, but there's not back and forth. There's not like an exchange of ideas. There's not a bettering of ideas that goes on. It becomes a versus sort of thing of like citizens talking at you, and then the board often talking amongst themselves as if the citizens aren't there, and then not a great way for people to participate. So like if you hadn't called on me, I wouldn't be able to share any of this information, right? There's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me out there with great information and ideas as well. And I don't know how you do that as a public meeting, but there's got to be a way that it's not just like Robert's Rules of Orders, no give and take. Like with the Waterfront Advisory Committee, we got tons of people, hundreds of people through the Village Hall to figure out and exchange ideas on how to do that. And it wasn't just an agenda item and a consultant told us this is the plan and we either approve or disapprove it. It was a working idea. And I think that's probably what you need to work toward when it comes to this. Because when you talk about, the reason I brought up that bypass road is the real cost of doing this isn't the Wiltsey property. The real cost is all the things that you have to do to serve it. So whatever it costs to build the road and the infrastructure on Wiltsey, you have to add to that bypass road. Whatever you're doing to handle that traffic is also a part of this cost. And So you really, I mean, people, and there might be better ideas, and people have to have a conversation about like, how big do you want to get? I think Allison Werner has brought that up a lot of that you've got to talk to the community. Do they want to be a 2,000 person village or not? And again, I'm saying this as a housing proponent here. I want to build housing, but I think there's a discussion to be had amongst people. So that you get that buy-in and so they understand the benefits of it and what it brings to the community.
I found the few public input sessions that have been around since I've been president have been pretty great dialogues. But making sure that we schedule enough of them because not everybody's schedule works out that well. And also to get board members there is also really helpful.
Well, that's just it. I think you were there, but there's not any other board members hearing those people, right?
Or some.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can get that information back for the next meeting and then let's go to direction from there.
Sounds like Miles is gonna contact them, so then we'll get it on the agenda when we hear back from them.
Thank you, Miles.
Text her out. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate it.
Well,
Okay. I think we should move on to 8. The resolution regarding Alan Strock for years of service on the Library Commission.
So Heidi had put together this resolution. It's in the packet. As you can see, the Library Commission is very proud of the work that Mr. Strack has done. So we want to give him the resolution, and Heidi also did order a little monument there for him. So that would be presented to him as well.
There were a couple edits that the Library Commission talked about yesterday. I just want to make sure those were reflected in this.
They did not share that with me.
They did not, okay. It was just 2 really minor edits. It looks like maybe the edits were made. I don't know, Julie, if they reached out to you.
They didn't give me any edits to the resolution.
We
no.
had previous conversations about it, and I made some changes based on like 2 weeks ago discussions I had with Sheila and Julie.
Okay,
And
maybe
Christina.
the one we reviewed yesterday was old then, because I don't see those here. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion by Bell, second by Roscoe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote, motion carried. Okay, 9A, award bid for Mill Road Electrical.
Okay, so if Dan's on the line, this is really Dan's, but as part of the Mill Road project, there's some electric work that has to be done. They put it out for bid. They had one company respond. It's Board Electric for $107,055.
Yes, and I did call around. We tried to draw up a little bit more, but the job is kind of small. And both me and Jennifer from Robert E. Lee kind of looked into it on Friday. I think the biggest lesson that we learned from this, in the future, I will purchase the lights because there's quite a bit of markup. That could have saved us some money in the future. So the next project we do where we have to purchase something, I'll purchase it separately and write it into the bid that way. Other than that, from the calls we made, the reason people didn't bid on it is the distance, and it's kind of a small job.
Denise has a question.
Denise?
I have a question for Dan. What is the alternative of the open cut PVC?
That was just something I'd asked the engineer to put in just in case somebody wanted to come in and just use a trencher, because down by the beach, you should be able to do that. And actually that came up a little higher than just boring it. I think it was $1 a foot more, but I wanted to offer that option to see if maybe a smaller person or a smaller company would come in and just trench it. So.
Okay, so we don't need it then, is what you're saying?
Correct. It was
Okay.
just an option to maybe let somebody else bid on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a
Alright.
motion to approve.
Motion by Bertle, second by Cox. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Yeah, miscellaneous clerk treasurer, draft ordinance or miscellaneous clerk treasurer references.
Okay, so the next, so B, C, D, E are all being introduced, and if you're okay with them, they will move forward to the next month. So the first one we're gonna have is to abolish the combined office of village clerk treasurer, and miscellaneous clerk treasurer references. And I apologize, the staff report number says it's for item A and B. The award bid was added after the agenda and staff reports were put together, so that doesn't match, but it's really for, the staff report is for B and C there. So, basically what happened is years ago, we had a clerk treasurer and we made that position by ordinance. It was a charter ordinance, and then years later, we just separated them, but we never passed a new ordinance to do that. And we never went back and changed it in the code anywhere. So now the references in the code are wrong. This is just a cleanup to fix that old charter ordinance that was passed.
So moved.
Second, okay?
Motion by Cox, second by White. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that'll go,
Motion carries.
that'll go to the board next month then.
And that was all of them through E, or did you just did B, C, and D?
So, and then the miscellaneous, so the abolishing it is the first thing you have to
Okay.
do. Then there's the miscellaneous amendments. Then we move into the miscellaneous amendments for the fee and penalty related amendments. What happens is the code repeatedly says what you charge somebody. But what this village does is every year we adopt a fee schedule by resolution, which is now in conflict with your code. So this would go through, and wherever it's talking about the fee schedule, you'd take out the actual number and you'd make it say per the fee schedule. Again, it's a cleanup. And it would clean up the penalty section as well, because the penalty section is outdated. Just making it so we don't get in trouble where someone says, but the ordinance which is adopted says this.
I'll make that motion.
I have a question, Nate.
Yes.
Will it be where it states on page 109, amend the entire municipal code to correct Scrivener's errors? Will that include the his or hers?
Because it says references to he, him, or she, her, spacing, etc. So we would take care of that as well, Denise. The only thing we wouldn't touch is chapter 66, because cleaning up these clerk treasurer, miscellaneous penalty fees, etc., all of this, that chapter 66 has different rules governing it, so I can't just go in and change them.
And so then my other question is by not seeing what those Scrivener errors are, we're just trusting staff and we're pre-approving something that we haven't seen.
It's gonna come back to us next month.
Not the Scrivener's errors though, so. I mean, we could, but I have to. So when you're looking at these ordinances, there's double space. It's easier to just delete it, or there's not a capital P, so you just wanna correct it. We can go through and do a whole track changes on all of that. I guarantee you I'm gonna overwhelm the board and they're not gonna know what they're looking at, but we can certainly do that on all of those other chapters and present it to you. Usually with Scrivener's errors, you're saying there's errors out there and we, the board, approve staff to go in and fix these minor amendments or changes.
Just a question.
Okay. Could you send that track changes document to anybody else to see it as a separate thing? I mean, it's.
You could, but here's the problem, you know, when you do track changes and then you, after you go back and accept them, so many times there's an extra space there. I mean, what we do is we save it the before and after. So if anybody ever questions what, you know, they can go back and they can see how it read before and how it reads after.
That's
So
fine.
they can't say
As
that
long
they-
as that's done, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. All right.
Then the next chapter is the cable franchise. We have cable franchise agreement, in 1980s, expired 15 years later at the end of the 90s. It was never removed from the code, so this would delete that chapter in its entirety.
No longer applies.
No longer applies.
I so
Okay.
move that we approve that.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Champeau, second by Cox. All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Bye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Speed study.
So this came from the Parks Committee, and it is basically, every once in a while we get these requests to reduce the speed on Highway 57. I shouldn't say every once in a while, it's quite a bit. Dan recommends, that it go down to 35, miles per hour. That's what he had told the committee. And so the committee agreed to move it forward to the DOT to do this speed study. It'd be a free speed study. DOT will look at it and say, should it be reduced? And if it should, what should it go to?
I just want to comment that one of the reasons Parks decided to recommend this to the board is because we are looking into that Highway 57 trails. We're gonna have pedestrians walking there. It, a free study can't hurt.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add there is speed limits do not slow traffic. You
True, we
need
did
to,
comment that, because Allison said she thought the speed limit was fine, and I said, you gotta be mindful that whatever the speed limit says, people are always going to go over anyway.
yeah, to really do something, there's a lot of traffic calming measures you can do, but this is a place to start, so. I'm in favor.
So moved.
Motion by Roscoe,
Second.
second by White. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Will that come back to the board or will that go to Parks? It'll go to Parks first and then to the board. Okay. So the next one is the trail easements. So this came out of Parks as well. So as you know, we are doing a trail along Highway 57. Stantec has done some engineering out there. We are to the point where we want to approach the people and say, hey, will you give us an easement 15 or 20 feet from the right of way inland? So we are just looking, I guess, for the go ahead to contact these people, start securing the easements, because as they come in, then we're gonna have the attorney draft the actual easements, and then we're gonna actually have to sign them.
We just need a motion.
Be a motion to proceed with securing the easement.
Motion by Roscoe,
Second.
second by Cox. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, freedom of information policy. So this is something that I've talked to Julie a little bit about over the last couple of months. A lot of communities have a public listing that says these are the people that have asked for this information. I think it's something that's useful. Before I spend much time setting up the policy and all that, I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to see how the board felt, because if it's just me that think that's a good idea, then it's not worth doing. So just looking for the direction on that. Really looking at setting not much more of a policy than is there now, but also just to make that request log public, more or less.
Fine, I mean, transparency has to go both ways. I mean, this is pretty standard from my experience, so I'm comfortable with this.
Okay, we'll bring something back. Denise, Patrice, any feelings?
I don't have a
Just
problem with that.
Wondering, how, does it entail a bunch more work? Do we really need to know? I don't know. I'm kind of benign on it.
Guess what I'll look at is I'll keep in mind the amount of work that it's gonna impose, because that's a fair point. No, I don't think so. I think there's consensus. Okay. The annual announcement.
It's just something we have to statute say we do every year. We have to announce how people, that if you want to sign up for emails and notifications from the village, we contact the clerk and you can be added to an email list, and we'll add you to the list. It's a subscription service.
I think once again that only having it on the village's website is not enough, that there should be a small ad in the Pulse.
How do we want to have that? Is it going to be a reference to say, hey, send an email to this address to subscribe, or do we want to send them to a website or both?
We can do both. More options to give people, the better, especially because a lot of people have been very vocal about the village not being very well at communicating, and not specifically Sister Bay, just in general. But,
Can I make a suggestion on that? Since we're working on the new website, and I know we said this last year, but it didn't go anywhere. We seriously are working with the new website. We've been working with Town Web on part of it, and now next week we start meeting with OpenGov on the other part of it. But wait until that is up and that they can actually go in and enter the data and subscribe on their own. It might be a good way to make that splash and say, and hey, to stay up to date, don't forget the subscription service.
So,
Because right now, because if we say, hey, call the clerk now, but then but in a month, we have something else. Kind of
so how close are we on that website?
They were supposed to have it done by the end of the year, but they were supposed to have it done by the end of 23.
Okay, so if that's coming up, then can we, if we want to put an ad out in the public, can we wait? And that's done?
I think we should put it, I mean, like, I understand that it's gonna get done soon, but at the same point, I'd like to say, well, if it's not done by, say, April 1st, let's put it out anyway. Just to reach out, so
Sure.
that should. Whenever the website is done, or April 1st, whichever happens soonest.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That makes sense.
Okay. And the financial report.
So Natasha is here in case there are any questions.
Right, I'll make a motion, we pay the bills in the amount of $1,852,252.21.
Second.
Motion by Bell, second by Roscoe, discussion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Staff reports.
So I'll just go through my part real quick. Dan has his, property closing is tomorrow. The annual report, we finished the annual report. It is available on the website for anybody that wants to look at it. Short-term rentals, we had told the public we were gonna revisit that in January and February so that the Plan Commission will start that process in January, provided, the chair approves. Parks Building RFP, we reviewed 7 responses, but we're gonna look at it, or we received them and we're gonna actually look at it in February and try and make a decision on that and make a recommendation. Board training, the board had asked for some finance and budgeting training, so there's some information in there about that.
Nate,
Yes, Denise.
I have a request. I brought this up at Parks, when we, reviewed the housing study. I didn't repeat myself tonight, but, when we were talking about that, I think the housing study should be sent to Plan Commission because over and over and over again, it talked about how STRs are impacting not just the housing stock, but what's actually also happening with rents. And I think the Plan Commission should be very much aware of that, and they should be sent that in maybe a separate packet, maybe now, just, you know, so that we can have a conversation when we're talking about STRs, because as all the public hearings that we had and public comment about STRs, nobody would buy this house, you know, for a first-time homeowner or this, that, or whatever excuses that STR owners had. There are now facts and figures that debate their position.
May I say something?
Sure.
I studied when we were talking last year, the impact of STRs in communities like ours. And quite a few studies, you can review them yourself. I can even reference some for you. Claim that 10% of the increase in value of homes was due to the STRs. The remaining was due to COVID and the people leaving big metropolitan areas to go to towns like ours. So just because someone says something in a meeting like they did tonight, that STRs are the cause of these property values going up. If you look at the ramp in value, it started in 2020 when it really accelerated before the STR explosion happened. So I just be cautious about going down that path because it is opinion. And there are studies that show it's not quite accurate. So, and 10% of the value going up could be debated, could be 15, could be 20, I don't know, but there are studies that oppose that.
I understand your point, Don, that I didn't see any hard references backing that up. At the same point, do I think that the plan commission should have a housing study? Absolutely. For a lot of other reasons.
Yeah, so Stantec it's already on their radar to do a presentation next Tuesday to the Plan Commission, provided it's approved in these.
Okay,
I just like data, no opinion. That's just why I'm bored, so.
Sure. Okay. Dan, did you wanna, you're done with yours? Okay. Anybody have any questions about the other staff reports? Tasha, Dan, you have anything to add?
Just guys did a great job this weekend. We got hit with a pretty big snowstorm and drove around Monday and they really had everything taken care of and they came in the evenings, made sure EMS was cleared out. I was really proud of everything they got done this weekend.
Great. Okay, committee reports.
An appointment.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to appoint Maurice Ash to the library committee. Commission, thank you. Any discussion, questions?
I received no documentation.
We put that on the agenda today, so there is potentially two vacancies on the library committee.
Yes, I plan on talking to Sarah about that under the library report.
Okay. I had a chance to talk to one of the people. There is definitely one opening for the library commission. So the librarian and Sarah had asked me, can we get an appointment so we can keep the commission going?
We don't even have a quorum right now. So we had a meeting yesterday and we were unable to vote on anything. And so there's a sense of urgency that we have one vacancy confirmed. We have a imminent vacancy likely to happen in the coming weeks. So we're trying to get somebody appointed to that seat as soon as possible so our February meeting can be effective.
Okay, can you give me, this name is not familiar to me. Can you tell me something, Nate?
I did ask him some questions that I thought about you for, Denise. I asked him if he believed in banning books. He said absolutely not. The library is there to disseminate what the public wants to read. I said, well, you can't have every book everywhere. He said, no, Christine should go in there and respond to the public's requests. If there's a hard to get book, she should do that. He's working with the senior tax prep,
He's a CPA.
Yeah, he's a CPA. He lives down the street from me. I've talked to him many times. He's a pretty level-headed guy.
He has experience in building projects or guiding building projects. I have actually not spoken with him, but the library commission, including Christina, who runs the library, spoke highly of him, and he was one of the two individuals who were recommended to fill the vacancies.
And then the other question I had for him is, can you attend this meeting? Will you be able to attend this meeting? He said, yes, I can, and if I have any commitments that are in conflict, I will remove those commitments. Because he's very passionate about the library commission.
How long has he lived here in Sister Bay?
Probably at least 4 years that I know. I mean, I didn't remember exactly
Okay.
when he moved in.
Okay, well, if Christina recommends him, and there's nobody better than Christina, I feel comfortable with that.
Okay,
Kind of where I was at too. Thank you.
okay, so I've got a nomination out there. Anybody wanna make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Roscoe,
Second?
second by White, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Lisa's appointed. Okay, on to the committee report. Coastal byways.
They've applied for their grants, for the coloring book. They got some feedback, they need more information.
Okay.
As well over there.
Emergency management, we have a
The county is supposed to let us know who has been appointed. As we've talked about before, we're hearing things, but they have not contacted us to meet with us yet.
finance committee. We had one meeting, we discussed, the reimbursement of Paul Anschutz, and we deferred that until she was in compliance with some issues that were going on there, so we pushed that off. Fire board,
We have that. So that's not-
ad hoc green tier,
We are meeting, is it Monday or Tuesday of next week?
Monday.
Okay, it's wrong on the calendar on here, so we should update that.
My calendar shows
Monday?
22nd.
At 2:30. Fabulous. Okay, I'll show you where I saw it, different. So we meet Monday, and we'll have an update in February.
historical society,
Basically, they just talked about doing some more advertising to get more exposure to the public, and they are finished repairs on painting. And they put all the Chris Kindle Market decorations away in the storage shed.
Did we ever hear back about how the Chris Kindle Market did for the Historical Society? Thought that was something we talked about, but that it hadn't come through in our last meeting.
Yeah, I don't have that number, but maybe next month I can get it from them.
library commission,
I think we covered the main concerns that we've had, but the Library Commission continues to continues.
Denise has a question.
Yeah, Denise?
Okay, so I'm aware, I'm just wondering, are we to be concerned with the library committee? I know Al Strack has been involved for a long time, and his retirement is fine, but now we have I've become aware that another member wants to resign, and I have heard rumor that the maintenance person is resigning.
Yeah, I was gonna talk to the administrator and the staff about the maintenance resignation. I learned about it yesterday. I wasn't ready to bring it up in this forum, but we can do that. So what we did have a resignation that I heard about yesterday during the library commission meeting. Ron served about 10 hours a month doing maintenance for the library. It's a really important position. There is a lot of maintenance, especially just given the aging of the building and some of the repairs that we have underway. So we don't have a solution yet, but I wanted to talk through potential solutions. One idea that came up yesterday was, could we partner with the village of Sister Bay and potentially Dan's team or someone to help with maintenance instead of have, the solution that I guess the library has had over the last 10 or so years, that maybe there's a way we could create more continuity with the village. So at some point, maybe we could talk through that, but I was gonna address that.
Okay, so we'll
And-
hear more about that. And then my other question is, why was Sparkle Cleaning fired?
Their fees increased significantly outside of market rate. And another bid came in quite a bit lower. We talked with management about what made the most sense from a budget standpoint, from an ability to commit to the cleaning schedule that was needed. And so ended up taking the lower bid, and I forget the name of the service, but it was a really hard
Canopy.
decision because Sparkle had been there for a while.
So were there any complaints with Sparkle?
At the management level, there were conversations. And then during negotiation, there was an unwillingness to bend.
Okay, because it's also my understanding that the new bid is for less time.
Yeah, so overall, part of why Sparkle had been increased was really from COVID. And so there was increased cleaning. And then when we looked at the budget, we recognized a need to cut costs across multiple components. And that was one of the areas that we ended up needing to cut costs on. They're still coming, I think, twice a week is the new plan, but we, based on what we
Versus,
needed,
versus 5 days before.
maybe 3 days, I forget where they landed, but yeah, it was every day except, yeah, it was 5 days a week.
Thank you,
I
Sarah.
can get you more details on that. We had quite a few debates on that. And there were, I think, 2 or 3 different meetings that content was brought forward before we made a decision.
We're in a committee?
Not much to report, we met, we're not meeting in January.
Okay.
December was last one, yeah.
Ad hoc outdoor rec has not met. Parks,
Does anybody have any questions?
I think just something to highlight is that we are meeting with the Friends of the Ice Rink on Monday to discuss the ice rink project. with Park Committee.
okay. Personnel has not met. Plan meets next week. Trying to think what we had planned before board last month, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's nothing there. SBA,
Meeting tomorrow morning, I didn't make last week.
tourism zone.
There was nothing unusual or different there. It was standard reviewing. Went through budget things and cases like we went through the DDC presentation on information, the numbers. Nothing earth shattering.
Utilities,
We didn't meet.
village hall,
We have a meeting set next Monday.
February 12th.
February 12th, yeah, to review the plan that was submitted at the end of December from the architect.
okay. And I'll make a motion that we accept the committee
Nate,
report.
Nate,
Oh,
you
yes.
missed the joint meeting of Plan Commission, Parks, and Ad hoc Outdoor Rec and Transportation.
Okay, there was that meeting back in December was,
They don't have that meeting before.
yeah, but I don't think we had minutes on there.
Yep, minutes
Oh.
are in here.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments on that?
No, sir.
There was a motion by Bill.
Yep, so motion by Kelly,
Second.
second by Roscoe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Then I will make a motion that we convene into an executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1975 1G for conferring with legal counsel for a governmental body who's rendering oral or written advice concerning the strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involving insurance able to. Bell, yes.
Veronica, yes.
Fox, yes.
Wait, yeah.
Birdo, yes.
Shampoo, yes.
Okay, we are in executive session. We did open session. Motion by Bell, second by Roscoe. Bell, yes.
Wait, yes.
Fox, yes.
Veronica, yes.
Birdo, yes.
Shampoo, yes.
Okay, we're back in open session. Does anybody have a motion?
I will make a motion to have our village attorney write up a stipulation with a deadline of February 29th.
Okay, motion by Roscoe,
Second,
second by Cox. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Was that opposed, Denise, or was that?
I said aye.
Okay, the timing was off there, okay. All right, motion carries. Matters to be placed on a future agenda for the committee, official or employee? Anything? Nope. Okay, then a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Motion by Roscoe,
Second.
second by White. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.